today on Knee Brace Radio, we welcome someone I really look up to, a host of Barstool Breakfast, host of Podfathers, Twisted History, amongst a lot of other things. Possibly the classiest guy in the Barstool brand. We welcome on Large. How you doing, sir? How are you?
Good. Yeah, classiest. That's tallest midget in the circus. Classiest guy in the Barstool brand is not a far stretch. I think there's some really classy guys. I'm certainly one of the older guys, so I think I give an air of class about me. But I can be just as much of a lowlife as the rest of them. How you guys doing? I'm a big fan of this show. I'm a big fan of you two guys. I'm just gonna name my next kid after one of yours.
Oh, wow.
So I appreciate the invitation to come on, and I will do my best.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. So just hopping on the back of that classy comment, like I said, for my taste, you are the classiest part of the Barstool brand because you're every piece of content I see, you've taken the guys out to like a really great restaurant that not a whole lot of people have heard about. Like a piece of content that comes to mind is whenever you took Gay Pat out to a restaurant, and you basically just asked him about what it was like coming out to his parents and being a part of the Barstool while also being a member of the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm lucky enough to be able to do a bunch of, so like you said, breakfast is my daily thing. Podfathers and Twisted History is my weekly thing. I've been lucky enough to do like some limited or stuff that I can resurrect at any time. So Extra Large was one of them. Kind of a cool name, I thought, for it. I came up with it. I don't know why I'm so proud of it, but anyway, it was Extra Large, and it was mainly stories from my Wall Street days. I was on Wall Street for 25 years before I came over here 2 years ago. I also did something called Mind Your Business, which was just focused on small businesses during the pandemic, how they're pivoting. Did Beats and Eats with Willie, which was like a food music type thing, which got basically put off because we were supposed to start refilming it during the pandemic. But with Extra Large, it was on Barstool Gold. Do you remember when Barstool tried to do that paywall thing?
Oh, I paid for it. I paid for it.
A lot of people had some animosity towards it. So Extra Large was one of those ones that people wound up liking, or at least had a completion rate over 90%. So people starting it and finishing it. So when we were coming to the end of Barstool Gold, where they said this thing was probably not going to be going around for a while, I said, you know what? Instead of another 6 or 7 minute story, which is always good. People love to hear old Wall Street stories. They love to hear about when I robbed people, when I was basically robbing them. I said, fuck it. Let's do a long one. And like to your point, I tried to get into a gay bar with Patty and have a burger at this iconic gay bar in the West Village. And they had thrown us out just because they didn't want the cameras to just in case go on some of their clientele who may or may not have been closeted, or they just didn't want to be on. So we went to a different restaurant, and Patty told a story about his coming out and stuff. Willie was nice enough to come along with us. My co-host Willie Colon won a Super Bowl with the Steelers, played for the Jets, offensive lineman, just playing offensive. He's just a big fuck. And I'm telling you, it gives you more insight into Patty than I think anything he's done in the 5 years that he's been at Barstool. So those individual stories resonate with me a lot more than take Mississippi State the under. Like, you know what I mean? And even though that's the stuff that's our bread and butter now, particularly with the Penn deal, I think those underlying stories and doing a little bit of a deep dive, there's some insanely interesting people there, including me. So I kind of like to do that.
I completely agree with you there. I completely agree, because that's exactly what draws me into some of your content is the deep dives you're willing to do. I mean, more recently, more topical, the September 11th when you had your wife on, that was such an interesting dynamic. I actually listened to it with my wife.
Okay.
And it was such an interesting dynamic because Annie, she's her own professional. She was great on the podcast.
But she's an ass kicker. I mean, I'm 6'5". I'm somewhere around 300 pounds. So I'm a big guy. It's not one of those ironic nicknames like, hey, tiny or something. But she's a little spitfire. We call her St. Anne. She does all the so Twisted History is the history podcast I do once a week. So she does all the research for it. And then I take her research and I go off on left turns where I bring in other stuff. And then I put it all into quasi script. We have on special guests. Vibbs is the guy who has the most continuity with it. but we'd love to have all other people on, as far as Barstool personalities, bringing different people. But yeah, it just so happens that she and I have such a personal connection. And I had written a blog about my day at 9/11. I wrote it 2 years ago. So it took me 17 years to write this blog. I never had any interest in doing it. It was more like an avoidance type thing. So I tell people when I wrote it, I was just as soon about to hit delete as I was to send. And when I put it out there, not for clicks or anything like that, I got such an overwhelming positivity. Like, I don't know, you guys, I don't know if you guys read your comments. I mean, but there are some very mean people out there.
Read every single one.
Okay, so I don't know if this is a hot take, but there are some very mean people out there.
Absolutely, there are.
Yeah. I'm lucky enough that I don't have a ton of them, but there's always an eat a dick in there somewhere, right? Eat a dick fatty or something like that, or kill yourself or something. With the 9/11 blog I did 2 years ago, there was such an overwhelming amount of positivity towards it that I put it out the second year, and so I redid the second. So this is the third year I put it out. And so then I realized that my story isn't half as interesting as my wife's. So she was nice enough to come on the podcast, went like an hour and a half telling it, and she nailed it. And so this little, and we know what podcasts are like. You guys have, knee brace, and you see where you kind of land on, and you're in a very competitive genre, right? Because you guys are trying to find what you are. So who the fuck knows what you're ranked, right?
Yeah.
So we're a history podcast. So we know what we're ranked. And we're ranked in the 30s. And we hear a lot about Call Her Daddy, who is, or Pardon My Take, or anybody, but, they don't talk about these secondary and tertiary blogs. And we're new. We've only been around for 5 months. And then it wound up going and being in the top 5. So it was so well received because I think people, you guys are both younger than me, are very interested, especially if you have a view from 30,000 feet, you're growing up in Omaha or something like that. To hear somebody that you like, kind of know, maybe respect, tell their story from that day, even though it's not worse than any other fucking story out there. We whatever. There are some terrible stories. So I'm glad it resonated with people. And my wife now, this bitch, she's getting all the positivity afterwards. Like on the worst day of the year for her, the day where they consistently on TV show the plane that essentially hit her father and killed him. That's every fucking TV station shows. Like imagine your dad get hit by a car and they just show that car wreck once a year, all day, every day. Now, in that, as long as we keep the fucking TVs off, she gets this wave of positivity.
Yep.
Yeah, that's priceless, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So. Actually, Kyle actually wrote a 9/11 blog because Kyle's from Long Island.
Yeah.
So he wrote a 9/11 blog, and actually we linked to the podcast that you did with your wife and a link to your blog as well because it resonated with us so much.
I thought mine was a lot better than Kyle's. I mean,
honestly, it was. I was writing mine in between sales calls, so I can't really.
Exactly. Yeah. Still, grammar counts. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's why Nick edits everything for me. I kind of want to get back to the beginning a little bit here. As you mentioned, you were working on Wall Street. You had your own blog, Take a Report. How were you a little bit nervous getting into Barstool? How did you wind up getting your start there? I mean, being the older guy in the room's got to be a little bit intimidating going into a young company.
Yeah, I didn't have, so yes, the answer is yes. I was extremely intimidated, but I was intimidated because when I came to Barstool the first day, so to backtrack a little bit, I graduated college. I postponed my enrollment in law school for 1 semester. I went down to the floor of the American Stock Exchange. A week later, I called up law school and said, go fuck yourself. This is where I'm going to make the money for the rest of my life. So I gave them law school. I was a specialist on the floor of the American Stock Exchange, then a $2 broker, which means nothing to some people and everything to others. Then I went over to New York where I was a clerk for JP Morgan. Then I went down to Atlanta and and that's where I first got my pad with Robinson Humphrey. Then I bounced around, but Citigroup is where I made my bones. I was a block trader. I traded utilities at Citigroup. Made my way up to like managing director at one of these places. So I was managing director at my last 2 stops. So whatever. So it's a 25-year career where I sort of made it to the middle, right? Like I made it to the middle. I missed those fuck you years. I never traded the over-the-counter markets until they had rules. So I never really got to really rob people and just have those $8 million years or anything like that. I did okay. I have no complaints. But in 2007, 2008, and people who know what happened in the end of 2008, that's when the market had come in. I had a blog called Take a Report, and it was wildly popular because there weren't a lot of blogs back then. And it started in the Wall Street community. It didn't have much to do with the markets, But then it branched out and I couldn't get my hands around it. So 250,000 hits a day, 100,000 of individual users. There was no mobile platform. No mobile platform. You had to look at it on PC. Still, it was, one of my biggest fans was Kevin Clancy. And then Kevin Clancy had put it in front of Dave. So Dave had asked if he could fly me out to Boston. This is in 2008. I said, no, I can't. I'm a director at Citigroup. I can't, but I go up to Boston quite a bit to go and suck Fidelity's dick. So I was like, while I'm up there, I'll stop off. And so I went in there, I stopped off in like an Irish bar. It was just me and Portnoy, chubby with the bald spot. And he had like girls in like Catholic schoolgirl uniforms. We sat down, had a beer, and he'd offer me a job to be Barstool New York. Because back then it was supposed to be like Barstool Boston, Barstool Philly, Barstool New York, Barstool Miami, maybe, Barstool Chicago.
Well, it ended up being Barstool Heartland and all that. With
correct. And meanwhile, I don't know anything about Barstool at that time. I say no, right? So I say no. Citigroup's stock goes to 1. Stock that I got at 45 went to 1. I get fired for Take a Report. The market comes in. And then my career, the trajectory of my career, right after Citigroup, because of the popularity of Take a Report, the next stop, ICAP, I made the most money I ever did in a calendar year. So again, no complaints. But then I was kind of in this horse latitude forever. So flat to down every year. Meanwhile, Barstool was doing this, flat to up every year. Not this last 3-year thing that's been going on, right?
Yeah.
I get laid off from the last place that I was working. It was a Canadian firm. They laid off 25% of the U.S. operations. I was last in, first out. I was there for just over a year. No hard feelings. So then I had 2 opportunities on Wall Street where it was going to be one of those rinse and resets, kind of go in, hit the ground running, make my bones, make my money, stuff like that. And Kevin reached out to me and he said, hey, listen, somebody told me that you got laid off. I know this wasn't on your radar. Why don't you just come in, do the radio show with me and this guy Feidelberg, and do a podcast that I do with Feidelberg also. I think me and a guy named Riggs, and then I'll do a podcast with me and this guy named Feidelberg. So
Wait,
I don't know any
hold
of
on,
these
I'm
motherfuckers.
sorry. So almost like a little bit over 2 years ago, that first interview you did on KFC radio was like that day that you went in?
Yeah, so I came in.
I remember that episode because I was a regular listener of KFC radio, and I remember you came in and you just let it rip, and I loved you then.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that was,
you know
that
what?
was before you were even an employee.
Right. And this is the longest answer to Kyle's short question. I didn't give a fuck, right? Like I really didn't give a fuck. Dave was out that day. So it was me, Riggs, and Kevin. And maybe Trent was in there or something on radio, the 4 to 6 slot. And then when I did KFC radio, the podcast, it was me, Kevin, and Feidelberg, who, by the way, could be the nicest guy. I mean, I know there are very nice guys. Clem leaps to mind, right, as far as being one of the nicest guys in existence. But Feidelberg,
Clem's a gem.
Oh, God damn it. Clem is a guy. Yeah, he's my guy. As you know, with Podfathers and whatnot. But Fights is up there also. So then I said, cool. Kevin's like, you writing anymore? I'm like, no. I was like, but I have I was like, why, do you need to see my writing? He's like, no, I have some of your writing printed out, I think he had said. I said, okay, because I think I have a couple of 1,000 blogs that I could just give to you, because my wife had printed them out. It used to be next to my toilet because there was no cloud when I was typing. There was no cloud. It was pre-cloud. So we had a hard copy. So like now, if you're looking for a job at Barstool, you'll write 50 or 60 blogs. You'll write 10, 5, 3 great blogs or something, and then do a skit where you get hit in the face pie. I was like, if you need 1,000 blogs, I have them. He's like, no, I'll mention it to Dave. And then Dave came back the following week. This was before Dave was Dave. Like he was still approachable. Like this isn't Dave now at all. But he's a big time celebrity. His celebrity has gone like this, right?
Right.
And Dave's like, he's like, what do you want to do? I was like, he's like, I remember you being a writer and stuff like that. You want to write for us? I was like, yeah. He's like, I'll give you this for a year and then figure out if this is what you want to do. It wasn't a big number at all. It was more than what other people were making for the same job. And I said, yeah, that sounds good. Because my wife had said to me, listen, the other 2 jobs and Barstool, if we won the lottery tomorrow, would you even consider the other 2 jobs? I was like, there's no fucking way. She's like, would you consider going to Barstool? I was like, I think so. I think I'd like to give this a shot, just to go. But so I went there with zero care in the world, to be 100% honest with you. And that's not me being tough guy or anything, Kyle.
Mhm.
But then I went to the office. I think I was wearing a sports coat, and like somebody put down a vape pen. Somebody was like, "Is that a cop?" And I felt like the oldest, fattest, fucking sweatiest, pale. I was wearing a sports coat. At the old office, you sit on a fucking couch there, you get pregnant. It was a dump. And hey, here's the new guy. So I came in the following week. And then a little less than a year from that, I went into a side office with Erica, the CEO, and I hammered out a 3-year deal that was very generous of them. So I'll be peddling smut until I'm 50 years old. I'm happy to report. So that was my trajectory.
So like Nick said, you came in, you crushed your interview on KFC radio. And like you said, you just let it fly.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you're on Barstool Breakfast, do you ever get like a little bit nervous about some of the stuff you say? I mean, being live, I would be so nervous. I would say one little thing and cancel culture would come after me. Yeah. I feel like you kind of push the limit more than anybody. And I want to thank you for being on Barstool Breakfast because you stopped me from driving into oncoming traffic a lot when I was going to my last job. So I appreciate that. But do you ever get a little bit nervous about that?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I was according to Gaz, I was the quickest member of Barstool to have a hit piece written about them. I was only there for a couple of months, maybe, when Deadspin had wrote there, calling me an old racist weirdo. That was the title. Barstool hires Wall Street old racist weirdo. I'm not that
creative.
Yeah. And so they'd put that whole thing out. And I know that I make some off-color jokes. And sometimes I get grandfathered, like even Liz is like, oh, it's just large. That's a Mexican joke. I don't care. It's just large. So I do have a little bit of that. But as the cancel culture gets more and more, I've tailored myself a little bit. I try not to. I still want to talk about things that I find funny. Mm-hmm. I'm taking into consideration people's feelings more. And then particularly through all this stuff that has gone on, Black Lives Matter and stuff, and hosting a show where at least part of the time I have Brandon Newman, who's a black guy. All of the time I have Willie, who's a black guy. In the booth from Sirius is Rod Braxton, who's a black guy. Za is one of our social guys. Za's a black midget. Patty is in the booth. He's gay.
Za's a black African midget.
Yes, he's a black African midget. Patty's gay. I'm old. I'm bald. I'm white. I'm privileged. Like we are a Benetton commercial, right? So we sometimes get away with a little bit more too because it's all done in this, big inappropriate family. Yeah. But I've definitely I've turned my thought around on a lot of stuff because I was the guy who was like, I was more of a shut up and dribble guy than anybody on Barstool Breakfast, just because I'm not a huge sports fan. So when I do tune into sports, I kind of just want to watch sports. And that was the ignorance of me at the beginning. And I realized that, listen, there's limits to everything, but there is a little bit more to it. So to answer your question, I'm slightly less. And you know what? I had a blog pulled down 3 days ago. They pulled it down. It was too inappropriate. Yeah. So I'm still, it got up and, the editorial process there is sometimes you don't know where it is, whatnot. But a huge wake-up call for me. By the way, it was pulled down because I had a GIF in the thumbnail that was deemed too pornographic, and it hit the banner or something like that. So it wasn't any of the content. It was just I sometimes choose inappropriate pictures because I like the clickbait.
Right. Yeah.
But Francis, who I think is one of the most talented guys. I was going to bring
up Francis as well.
Yeah. So Francis, Harvard graduate, one of the most talented writers, talented guys I've ever been involved with. Bad timing, bad decision making. Wrote about a girl who was missing. And as soon as he hit send, she was found dead, buried in somebody's backyard. And he got fired for it on the spot.
He also raised the athleticism of Barstool as well.
Oh, you just ask him, right?
Yeah.
But I wrote a blog on we used to have this big brain thing with Barstool, which is like Shark Tank. Yeah. So I said, caskets for the obese. I think we need to have more caskets for the obese. I mean, look at me, right? So I don't fit in the general one. And I almost used Jared Lorenzen as an example. Because Jared's a friend of the program, a friend of the program.
And he's also lost a lot of weight.
Yes.
Well, he had.
Yes, exactly.
I was going to say, Nick, come on, get with the time.
Yeah. Nick, you're fucking nasty. But he was one of the many fat people at Barstool, myself included. So
Mhm.
he was going to be lumped in there with like Jared and Clem and me and Eddie and Willie. And there's plenty of fat people to go around. Big Ev and Glenny. But I didn't use him. He died the next day. And I was like, holy shit, I didn't use him. But like, that's how
Imagine
easy
if
that
you
is.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how easy that is. So you can't please everybody. I'm self-deprecating enough that I think people know that I'm just as apt to make fun of overweight white Irish fathers of three as I am to a young Chinese, transsexual dancer. Or it just comes to mind. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So to bring it back around to Podfathers, so I found out I'm going to be a dad in February.
Congratulations.
He didn't just find out. He in February. Sorry.
Yeah. So she's due in about a month and a half.
Mhm.
I found out on Leap Day. On that day, first thing I did, I turned on Podfathers. I had never listened to Podfathers. First thing I did, listen to episode 1. And I've since gone on from episode 1 and listened to as much as I can.
Right.
Because I'm thanks to Kyle, I'm a longtime Barstool listener. And
Okay.
I knew that since I'm having a kid, I was like, oh, I gotta find out the Barstool way to raise a kid.
We can't fuck that up. Like, you can't fuck up raising your kid. We can't fuck up raising our kids. We can't. And it's a collective we. It's not like,
Right.
I don't mean us white guys can't fuck up raising kids, or us, media guys can. We can't do it, right? So it's pretty important. And so, just as a society, so Barstool having Podfathers, I don't know if you noticed this, Podfathers always has 3 ad reads. We always have 3 ad reads. Everybody wants to advertise on Podfathers. Is Podfathers a top 5 podcast at Barstool? No fucking way. No fucking way does it have any. And I know I bring up Caller Daddy and stuff, and I know that they're to the moon.
For good reason, though.
Pardon my take. Yeah, that's to the moon. Spitting Chicklets, to the fucking moon.
Surprisingly to the moon. You wouldn't think so, but they are.
Yeah. KFC Radio to the moon. Like, so you're talking about those guys that are in the pantheon. Podfathers on the outside looking in, but people like the fact that there's something wholesome that they can do. And it was started by Chaps, Kevin, Clancy, and Clem.
Yep.
And then Kevin decided that he no longer respected the sanctity of marriage. So and the Kevin I went gone through his, and I joke around with Kevin about it all the time. Very good
absolutely,
friend. Yeah. So he had said right as I had started, he's like, by the way, Large, I just don't feel comfortable doing this because whenever I do add my 2 cents, we talk about commoners, it's thrown back to me. So try this baby powder. Oh, did you try that baby powder when you were cheating on your wife? Like, there was just something that it put a stink on the show. He's like, would you like to do it? So I went in and I did it with then Clem and Chaps. Chaps has some balls in the air now, both professionally and personally. So he's taking a little thing. So now it's me and Clem, except everybody, Barstool fucks because everyone's having kids. So I'll have Willie on, I'll have Coley on, I'll have Brandon on. I'm going to have Jamie Dukes, who's now doing this thing with Deion Sanders, which blows my mind. Deion Sanders worked with us. Brandon.
That's insane.
Yeah, Brandon Walker's coming on. Jerry Thornton's coming on. Ryan Whitney was on talking about his kid. He almost cried while he was a kid. Never shows fucking emotion.
Wow, that's insane, actually.
Yeah, so Podfathers has become like this really cool place where I can actually talk about my kids with Clem. We can just kind of complain, and it's a nice little outlet. And I think the fact that a lot of people who write in or talk to me about it, because my DMs are open, so people DM me all the time, and never any of this. I never get any like racks or just people calling asking for a job. But it's one of those things where a lot of people reach out and they're like, we don't even have kids, we just like it because we know we're gonna have kids and something. So it's one of those things that I'm real proud that I'm part of. I'm happy. Like, again, like I give Kevin a lot of credit. I give Francis a lot of credit for giving me my shot on radio. I give Willie a lot of my credit for when he got back from vacation, said, you know what, let's keep him on. Because me and Willie are like best friends. I give obviously Dave all praise to Dave Portnoy.
That dynamic between you and Willie is insane. It's I mean, if you would have told you 15 years ago that, hey, in about 15 years you're going to be basically best friends with a Super Bowl champion. I mean, you drug test yourself. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things where you don't know down the road where these things are going to lead, but I'm really glad Willie lives a mile and a half from me. That's
Really?
creepy. I mean, we didn't set that up at all. He lived 2.5 miles from me, and we just recently moved, my wife and I and the kids, and we moved without the kids, but they found us. But so now we actually moved a mile closer to Willie. So it's, we're gonna be roommates at some point in an old age home.
Yeah.
But yeah, we get along. And Willie, surprisingly, two different roads, right? Way two different roads. Hofstra to the NFL, Notre Dame, Wall Street, but then our roads diverged at Barstool. But Willie grew up in the Bronx, and he's got an older sensibility. I was born in the Bronx, raised in Brooklyn, so I surprisingly have a similar sensibility to him. So we really do get, if there's any one dig on our show, is that sometimes we agree too much. You like to have that foil, like a silver spoon, overeducated guy like Francis, who'll say something about golf or something, and then we could just ream him for it. So
or saying something about selling cocaine and losing money.
yeah. So but we try to keep it interesting and stuff. And like I said, I've done a lot of Willie's family parties. I feel like family when I'm there. My kids love him. He just had a baby. His son, William IV, is about to turn 7 months old. So it's all good. So professionally and personally, it's all been a pretty good experience for me.
Yeah. And shout out to the Podfathers, because they follow me on Twitter, which I don't know how that happened, but apparently they follow me.
All
so,
me.
Yeah. So Dan kind of Big Cat doesn't talk about his family much at all. You, on the other hand, talk about your family a lot. Was that something that you thought about before going into Barstool? Am I going to talk about my family? Am I going to keep them private? Or did it just naturally kind of come out on radio?
Yeah, so Dan and I, we populate two different universes altogether, right? And
Yeah.
I think you guys know that. I enjoy that you said that maybe there is some similarity. But Dan and I, our celebrity is so different, particularly when you look at the 8K after the Penn deal and you see the check that Dan was written versus the check that I was written. I wasn't, but Dan's had a lot of zeros. And Dan is infinitely talented, extremely likable and stuff. Dan has an Instagram account, and then he's got a private one. I don't think I'm giving it out because he targets it to friends. So he'll send me pictures of his kid taking first steps. And when we talk,
that's
Dan
awesome.
and I talk about kids. He's been on Podfathers, and he's very proud. His kid is gorgeous. He's a very proud dad, and he'll lead with talk about his family to me, right? Maybe to only me, or to very few people other than me. So he certainly is a proud papa, but he has to be more guarded than I am. But when I first started here, and it shows you the amount of change that it's gone through in the last now 2.5 years almost. I was in June, so 2 years, 3 months, 4 months. When I started talking about my family every now and again, glancing blows, they're an important part of my life. Somebody had hit me like with a DM. Listen, Large, Dan's going to fire you. Dan is. He had somebody who worked with him who used to talk about his family all the time, and it annoyed the shit out of the guys. So this guy got fired. I don't know who the guy is. Again, I never listened to Barstool before I got here, and I barely listen to it now, be honest with you. So I told the guy, okay, thanks, eat a dick. I'm still going to do it. It's my thing. And I think there's been a big change. Everyone has grown up since that 5 years ago where Dan had perhaps let somebody go, perhaps not. Maybe the guy just phased out. And now, because there's a lot more family men, they're expecting the clientele to grow up. Listen, everyone, we've been to a lot of colleges. I'm lucky enough to go to a lot of colleges. Like you said, I don't turn down a lot of gigs. So I go down to, Florida, Georgia, Notre Dame last year. Every one of these fucking places has Pink Whitney in the fridge. Every fraternity house, every sorority house asked me if I can introduce them to Alex and the late Sophia. So we're still very big in that demographic, but there is a ton of people like you who have kids, about to have kids, and realize that, wow, these guys are doing this. Like Large is going to Pittsburgh next week to do Riggs's tournament. Like that's pretty cool. But he's doing it without his wife and kids. That's pretty cool. Good for you.
That's pretty cool.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it adds something to where now people see me wearing a gold chain and being in a club at 4 o'clock in the morning with my pants down with a bucket on my head because I did that with Willie, and then we got thrown out. And and they see that as a 48-year-old father of 3, as opposed to just some fucking weirdo from Barstool, I think it helps more than it hurt some poor bastard whose name I still don't know, who got viciously fired by Dan apparently maybe 5 years ago or something.
Right. Well, Large, I really respect your time, and I respect how gracious you've been. Thank you so much for coming on. This is truly a dream come true.
Mm-hmm. You got to start dreaming higher, asshole. Right? You must already have a 12-inch dick, because I should be low on the dream list. Right? But anytime, guys, if you need me to follow up or anything, just let me know. I wish you the best of luck with the podcast. It's wildly entertaining, and you guys have some taste in guests. So it's a pleasure to do. I wish you guys the best of luck.
Thanks so much, man. Have a good night.
You betcha, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
See you.
Talk to you later.